Hi, Dr. Jensen. Welcome to the Genetic Genius podcast. I'm so excited to have you as a guest today.
Dr. Lulu, it is my absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on.
You're welcome. Before we dive deep into talking about transformation and life change, I'd love for you to talk about yourself and your story, just so our listeners can get to know you a little bit better.
Sure. So, Dr. Lulu, I have a really fascinating background, and I will take the time to explain it because it's the one thing that everybody always asks me about. So,
Great.
I'm a change and transformation specialist. And I have an approach for transformation that I use for both organizations and for individuals, which really helps them be confident in the way that they manage transformation. But how I got there is actually a really fascinating story. So I grew up as an entertainer, always singing, always performing, acting, dancing, in theatre, in contemporary music. I just absolutely loved it. And I was really inspired by people that were in a position of influence because of the artistic and creative things that they were putting out into the world. And I was really driven by this idea of contributing to the world in a really meaningful way. And so I thought that that was through music and through my voice and through connecting with people in that way. And so I studied and studied at the highest level that I possibly could. I studied opera as my undergraduate degree at the Victorian College of the Arts here in Melbourne, Australia. And it was a fabulous course, and I loved that process of learning how to sing in that really beautiful and technical way. But it wasn't quite enough for me. It was beautiful to sing that fabulous music and to connect with people, but I really love that two-way interaction. I love having a conversation with people and helping people. And so it was a long journey for me to really uncover that. And so after studying opera, I then went into contemporary music, or went back into contemporary music, which is really where I'd started, and I've got four contemporary solo albums. And in that journey, I ended up doing my PhD, and we can probably talk to the detail of that a bit later, but that took me on this journey of bringing together my two passions around music and the human experience, and also this sort of capability that I was building in parallel around understanding and helping people and organizations to change and transform. So that's sort of my background and, my journey of being an artist, and how that's sort of gotten me to the point where I'm at now.
Wow, love it. It's fascinating, how life shows us a new path sometimes, or it merges the paths together.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's like for you, I was seeing like this sheet of music, how the song was just going along, and then it's like, oh, I'm just gonna go along this different wave.
Yeah, that's a beautiful analogy. Yeah. I
um,
love Elon Musk's first wife. I believe she said something. I read this quote years and years ago, and it stayed with me, about having two passions, and those two passions coming together and creating new idea babies and delivering that into the world as a unique
yeah.
offering. Yeah.
That's so true. And, birthing sometimes the idea baby can be a challenging process.
Yes. Yes. Many, many years, decades, a whole lifetime to achieve. Yeah.
Which I think is what you help people do in one aspect, is birthing their idea baby.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I
Yeah,
mean, it's it's probably a byproduct of the work
right.
that I do with individuals, but certainly those merging of thoughts and things that people have carried with them for a long time, where they
Mhm.
haven't quite worked out how those parts of the jigsaw fit together. That's where the real magic is. Yeah.
Right. Totally. Well, fabulous. Okay, so let's talk about, you talked a little bit about your background with the music, but I'd love for you to just kind of dive a little bit deeper into the PhD path, about how kind of like you were inspired with research, and how that kind of opened up a new doorway, so to speak, for where you are now.
Yeah, sure. It was a really defining moment for me. And I must say, I did a lot of research going into doing a PhD about how people manage that, because it's such a big undertaking. And a lot of the advice was that if you if you just want to do a PhD for the sake of doing a PhD, you're probably not going to finish it. But if you have a topic that you're absolutely passionate about and really want to see through the learnings of, then you'll really thrive. And that's where I sort of luckily found myself. So my topic was a phenomenological inquiry into Pythagorean tuning in the creation of new music. So to break that down, so phenomenological inquiry is all about the human experience. So that's really understanding what that looks and feels like for the participant or the individual. And Pythagorean tuning, so Pythagoras, ancient Greek philosopher,
Yep.
mathematical models around the 3-2 ratio, and from that the Pythagorean tuning or the Pythagorean scale was a sort of a tuning system that we used to use for a long time, and there's lots of variations of that, and over time we've gone through lots of different tuning systems, and it's really only the last 70 to 80 years where equal temperament has been the tuning standard. So if you're not musical, that won't make a lot of sense to you, but things like the introduction of the piano meant that we needed something that was a little bit more standardized and easier to tune instruments to. And so we find ourselves in this environment where we're all using equal temperament. But really, there's so many frequencies in between the notes that we use. And all of those frequencies have an impact on the human experience, the phenomenology of that. So my research was exploring that. So for 6 years, I created new music, contemporary music, using recording software and collaborating with producers from all over the world, and really exploring what the impact of using Pythagorean tuning was to create new music. And I had so much fun doing it. I learned so much. Where I started with that research and where I ended were two very different places. But, you know, for 6 years, I absolutely loved it. I absolutely loved the research side of it, and you know, looking at the sort of the historical journey and how we got to where we are now, and some of the influences, the societal influences that had an impact on that, and also looking at, you know, some of the simple decisions that were made along the way that sort of propelled us on the path that we've gotten to. But anyway, there was one day where I had this light bulb moment where it all lined up for me. So I was lucky enough, I had this amazing piano tuner came to my house one day and tuned my piano perfectly in Pythagorean tuning, which was a very entertaining process to watch someone trying to do that. And so I got to immerse myself fully in these frequencies on a daily basis. And in parallel, whilst I was doing this research, I was also doing my corporate consulting. I was still helping organizations to change and transform, which is work that I love doing as well. And so what I would find is I would come home from a very stressful day in a corporate setting, and I would sit down at my beautifully tuned Pythagorean piano, and I would play something, even just improvising some chords or a scale or a song that I'd written, and it would either jar against how I was feeling or I would be aligned to it. So if it was a really stressful day, it would jar against me.
Right.
But if I got up on the weekend and I made myself a cup of tea and, you know, I was really relaxed and I read the paper and I was in my sort of zone, I'd sit down and I would already be perfectly aligned to these frequencies. So what that told me was that these frequencies, which have a richer resonance that you can feel more fully vibrating through your body, the benchmark for how I wanted to feel. I wanted that 3D rich resonance in my life, or, you know, that lights you up, that really vibrant feeling. So that was how I wanted to feel. But these frequencies would also show me how I was feeling, whether I was in alignment with them or whether I wasn't in alignment with them. So what I found is that as I would then work with the frequencies, there was this guidance element that would get me from how I was feeling to how I wanted to feel. You know, they'd give me that awareness. I knew that I wanted to be aligned to the frequencies, but by playing a bit of music, and you so beautifully said that before, you know, that visual of me singing a song with a bit of sheet music and going along that path, well, I would find that through playing music, it would help shift me from where I was to where I wanted to be. Now, we've all always said music is transformative and, you know, can lift you and change your mood, but we've never really explored why or how or put a method around that. And that was what the research was for me. It was really understanding that that power that music has, and trying to leverage it. And so that day where I realized that it was those sort of three elements, you know, having that destination of how I wanted to feel, that awareness of how I was feeling, and that guidance element that would help get me from where I was to where I wanted to be. That was the real moment for me where I realized that here was the value of this research and the understanding
Mm-hmm.
that I was already applying in my corporate work. I just didn't have the framework to describe what it was that I was doing. And so
Oh
that was
yeah.
how Transformation 3 came about. And I was able to sort of package that up as part of my consulting practice into a really valuable model that I've been using with organizations for the last 5 to 6 years. And I've now built it into a personal transformation course as well. So it's all really
Mm-hmm.
exciting stuff, but not at all what I thought I was going to get out of my research when I first went
Right.
into it.
Yeah. Oh, that's fascinating. I really, I work a lot with the physical body, with patients and the cells and the genetics. And so it's just fascinating for me to think about how sound can alter the actual cellular makeup, right? Because we know that the when we have, like you were mentioning, experience sound, we have a transformation, whether we can feel good or we can feel bad or we can feel lots of different feelings. But what is it actually doing in the body is so fascinating to
Mm.
me. And then I think you were like touching on the topics of your research, like how we can have the emotional and the mental and the physical transformation like all come together. So we can,
Mm.
like, when we have that sound come in, or we're using sound to not manipulate but to alter our environment in a positive way, then we can have this like amazing transformation take place.
Absolutely. And I think, Dr. Lulu, what you've touched on there is the real light bulb for me, was that I had gone into the research thinking that sound could just affect you whether or not you were signed up to the process. So I kind of had this vision of, maybe if we move back to using just tuning or Pythagorean tuning, that perhaps you'd walk through a shopping center and the music would all be, vibrating in a way that you could align to and be healed. That was sort of how I walked into the research, thinking that that might be where the value is, and
Right.
potentially that is. But really what I learned was you need to be signed up to the process. You actually need to be open to the experience. And
Mm.
so right at the end, after I'd finished writing up the thesis, I sort of worked with my research supervisor, and we just tweaked the title of the paper. And what I feel is really powerful is the question is, are you in tune? So it's not
Hmm.
about whether or not the music is in tune. So we walk around, and as musicians, those that are listening that understand music, perhaps you've trained, you're always aiming to be in tune. And
Hmm.
what you're aiming to be in tune with is equal temperament. Well, why? Why are we trying to be in tune with equal temperament? Are we trying to be in tune with ourselves?
Hmm.
And so the idea of Pythagorean tuning for me, a lot of the previous research and the perceptions around these different tuning systems is how audibly beautiful an interval might sound. So that's if you play
Mm.
two notes together, is that a jarring, is it a woof interval, or is it a perfectly harmonious sound? But
Hmm.
that's actually totally irrelevant, because you're only experiencing that music with your ears. We
Right.
should experience music and vibration and frequency, everything in life we should experience with our full body. So that's where it sort of shifts that focus of, are you in tune? It's not, are you singing the notes in tune with what equal temperament tells you you should be singing, and audibly hearing, which is something that is entrained in us anyway, because we listen to equal temperament. We know what it sounds like, and we know what we should sound like. But
Hmm.
really, that deeper exploration, that phenomenological experience of whether or not we're in alignment to those frequencies that we're experiencing. So yeah, fascinating stuff.
Yeah, I mean, that's so true. When we tune in to our environment or in the moment, we can have such a different experience as opposed to when we're not tuned in. And I think music is such a great gateway for that, because our cells are, yeah, so much a part of water, and water is able to vibrate so easily to the frequency of sound. So that's one of the reasons why our cells are able to shift so quickly when we're tuning in, tapping in, tuning into that natural vibration of ourselves, and then having it radiate around us in a different way.
100%. Yep. Absolutely, that sort of impact on the frequencies on water, that research work that's around was absolutely one of the starting points that I
Mhm.
sort of went into the research thinking that I would explore in a lot more detail. But once you start touching on some of these fields, you realize just how little work we've done,
Right.
you know, in those fields, but what enormous opportunity there is for that research to continue.
Yeah, I think we have like you just opened a little doorway to like this amazing amount of future research that will
Mm.
probably unfold. And so okay, so you were on the path, you've done this amazing research, and then you were already working with and coaching in the kind of in the corporate world.
Yeah.
So then how did you merge kind of that together with the corporate world and working with a transformation and helping people to tune in to their own personal life and transformation?
Yeah, it's a great question because the corporate space, they're big machines.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. They think with a corporate brain all the
yeah,
time.
yeah. And look, some of the organizations, I mean, they're all different. So you can work with a very small business that might
Mhm.
have 20 staff, and you really feel any tiny change is such a significant impact to that organization, but they're
Mhm.
able to mobilize around that change quite quickly. But then if you've got individual personalities that are playing a role in how successful that is, that can also be quite challenging. But
Yeah.
then you move to sort of your more mid-size, you've got 300 to 800 staff. That's a different experience again. They can still mobilize quite quickly, but they're not so limited by individual behaviors. You're
Mhm.
sort of taking a larger group on a journey towards their destination. But then you've got like the big corporates, the global entities, and in the government space as well, where it's really challenging for those organizations to keep pace with the change that's happening in the world around them.
Mhm.
So they're all that sort of scalability is all very fascinating, and I love working at each of those levels. But the idea about how things transform, that idea of having that clear destination, about having a clear understanding, that awareness element of all the foundations that you already have to build upon, and then that guidance element, which is really all the new perspectives that help
Mhm.
shift you from where you are to where you want to be. So that understanding of how things transform, that applies at those large scale complex organizations equally
Mhm.
to what it does in a small organization. But at the crux of it all is the people. So individuals make
Mm.
transformation happen,
Right.
and we all transform in that same way. So it
Mhm.
really is just about scaling the model to all of those different scenarios.
Right. Yeah. Do you see? So you talked about those three levels of transformation, which is awesome because a great question I'd love to talk to you about is okay, so we have the individual transformation and then we have like a smaller group and then a larger group. Do you see in the future of transformation happening because we're moving like 2020 has been a great transformation for the planet and
Oh yeah.
yeah, huge, right? And so do you see when you work with do you like break out those bigger groups into smaller individual groups so that they have a different type of interaction, and then does that kind of like multiply into the magnitude of healing and transformation within the groups? Does that make sense? Am I making sense with that question?
Absolutely. There's a couple of thoughts that I have on that. I'll go with my second thought first and remember the first one. But the second thought is just about the ripple waves. So
Mm,
as one thing transforms, the things around it can't help but to be shifted by that. And so in the personal transformation space, one of the biggest barriers that we have to change is people around us.
mm,
So, if you're with a spouse, for instance, and you're transforming at a really fast rate and they're
mm,
not perhaps on that same journey, that can be really challenging. And
mm,
so part of the personal transformation work that I do is it's about having a complete approach across all of the life domains that you have, so
mhm,
that you can move forward at pace and that those barriers don't get in the way of you having that amazing transformation and allowing those ripple waves of your change to positively impact the people around you.
mhm,
That's the first thought. But then the second thought, which is sort of a related thought, and that's on the organizational side. For those really big organizations, one of the most powerful ways that you can affect transformative change is just to set up a little pocket. So find some leaders, some go-getters that are really inspired, and can get them in a small group and get them to set up a test model. And then once that's working quite well, then start to bring other people from the organisation into that innovation hub, and then grow it out from there. Because sometimes trying to move the big organisations at pace can be quite challenging.
Right. Yeah. So little small breakout groups then cause the wave of transformation to excel, it sounds like.
Yeah, yeah. And a lot of the time it's about building confidence. So
Mm-hmm.
for large organizations, particularly government organizations that may not have had a lot of change in the past, or they feel that those changes haven't been successful, there's a
Mm-hmm.
confidence drop there in their ability to actually truly transform. So if you can
Right.
get a small group where you can make that happen, then you can grow from there.
Yeah, totally. I love that because, it's like the little seed is planted in a really positive way. And then it just kind of like grows and grows and grows and grows.
Absolutely. And actually, it's a similar approach that you can use for personal transformation as well. So
Hmm.
what we all tend to do is have this big destination that we've always carried with us,
Right. Yeah, totally.
rich, famous, whatever.
Yeah.
And it's just overwhelming and
Right.
unachievable. And so if you can make transformative change in smaller pockets in your life, just
Mhm.
making small steps forward, then you can build on that and grow from there.
Yeah, that's so true. It's like if you have this, like with health, if you have this major, massive health goal and you're stuck, so to speak, in this blockage of like moving forward, it's like you have to like slowly break it down, which I think is what you were saying. It's like, okay, so how can I change, my nutritional plan so that I'm not eating as much sugar? Or, how can I shift so that I'm exercising more? And so that, small transformations make the biggest impact, I think.
Absolutely. And even just setting a destination for tomorrow. How do I
Right.
want to wake up and feel tomorrow? What
Hmm.
can I do tomorrow that would help me feel more radiant or energized, or, like not setting
Hmm.
the targets that are so big that they're unachievable. Because then when you actually do wake up tomorrow and you achieve that, then that becomes your awareness element. That's your new foundation that you have to build upon. So in your sort of kit of transformation skills, you can go, oh yeah, I tried that for a day and actually I really enjoyed it. Okay, well, how can I build that into my life a little bit more? Does it need to be every day, or maybe it's just once a month or once a week, that I set
Hmm.
that target, so that destination is actually achievable, rather than maybe achieving that destination for that one day and then saying, oh, I'm going to do that every day. Well, it's not achievable. You've got to build.
Right. Yeah. One thing I found that I myself made a shift for this year in my transformational process was that before I would go to bed, I would just like, think about the things that I wanted to shift the next day in a positive way, like, okay, not because for me, like I can sometimes get wrapped up in all the thoughts about tomorrow, right? So like, okay, I'm
Yeah.
not going to go down that road, but instead I'm like, I'm going to like think about some positive things that I'll shift for tomorrow and then turn everything off. Like, okay, ding, done. And that has really helped me a lot.
It's a really good strategy. I think, gratitude practice is one
Mhm.
of those beautiful things that's becoming a little bit
Yeah.
more mainstream now, just to
Hmm.
reflect on the day with gratitude. But you can stretch that a little bit further
Yeah.
to get your transformation to happen. Because if you just do gratitude, then you're in the awareness element purely. But if
Right.
you do that gratitude in the way that you're exploring what is and isn't working, lovingly exploring what isn't working, then you can set that destination for the next day, knowing that it's evidence based, that you're not. That's one of the really key things about this model, is that you're getting guidance that's aligned to what's not working, or guidance that's aligned to your destination, not just getting guidance that's randomly going
Right.
to, make change in your life, but not necessarily change that you're aligned to. So yeah, there's some real little tricks there that you can use just on a daily basis to help shift things forward.
Yeah, when we have like I like what you said when you have the like the guidance. It's like one step forward, like where on that transformational path do you want to go? It's like if you're just like randomly throwing stuff out there, that's not being really clear about what trying to transformational path you want.
Well, what's really interesting is that we all have a default response to change, which can change as well, because we're
Right.
all always changing. But,
Mhm.
if I've got a questionnaire in my personal transformation course, and it really helps you to identify, looking back at previous changes in your life, what your
Mm-hmm.
default response to change is. And as soon as you realize what that is, then you start seeing it everywhere. You know, even tomorrow or the next day, you go, oh, okay, I'm too much in guidance here, which is exactly that example you just said, where
Mm-hmm.
you're constantly seeking new knowledge, but you're never actually implementing it in an action focused way into your own life. So yeah.
Right. Yeah, totally. Yeah, I find that with myself because I love to do lots of tasks. And so I'm like, okay, I got to refocus myself.
Well, the other thing that we all do is we've got that sort of subconscious marketing that we've had throughout our whole lives,
Yeah.
setting destinations for us, you know, what a good relationship looks like, what a successful career looks like, what a good lifestyle looks like. And we just carry those subconsciously without even realizing that somebody else somewhere in a marketing team has set those destinations for us. So actually really breaking that down and going, no, what are my values? What do I want my destination to look like? Really powerful activity.
Totally. Okay, great. Dr. Jensen, let's talk about, so we were talking about transformation and all the different like pathways. And so I'd like to talk a little bit more about the group transformation and the power that you can see when the group is working together. So we talked about little pockets, because I think that's a really big place for our listeners to understand right now, because we've shifted into a completely different place on the planet, especially as we move, you know, people are working from home and working in Zoom and all of this. And so what like do you see the tremendous shift that we can make now that we're working in this different, huge, different group transformation process?
It's just fabulous, isn't it? So I have to chuckle a little bit about this as well, because one of my pet hates is when people say change is hard. I see it everywhere. I saw it on a government marketing campaign right at the start of COVID, and it said, change is hard. And, you know, my gut response to that is no, change is not
No,
hard.
no, it's not.
Some change is hard that is done to you can be hard, but it can also be uplifting, exhilarating. It can propel you forward, you know.
Yeah.
So I accept people saying change can be hard, but not just flat out saying change is hard.
Right,
And
exactly.
so I think, if anything, what we've lived through in 2020 is that real recognition that we can change. We can change at pace. We can
Yeah,
adapt. We're, you know,
totally.
far more capable than what we thought, but not just at an individual level, because we've all gone through our individual version of that, but that society can change at pace. You know,
Yeah.
some of those barriers that were previously there around the way we've always done things actually can be propelled forward very quickly. So it's been fascinating to watch as a change and transformation specialist, but also I think that's really set that next level about what that new foundation that we have to build upon going forward. And so the positive, you know, is that we've learnt that lesson. Possibly what might be a little bit more challenging is just the uptick of change that's going to continue
Right.
from this point. So that a sense that we, you know, I often talk about how in organizations we talk about management of change, and there's lots of leadership development and professional development, but on a personal level we don't really dedicate that much focus to proactively managing change in our lives, and I really feel like we need to now.
Right.
I think, you know, there's a lot more mainstream acceptance of things like mindfulness and meditation, and I heard an actress, an Australian actress who's moved to the States. She was talking on one of our morning TV mainstream programs, and she said, I manifested that, you know, just as part of the conversation. And there was no justification or explanation of what manifesting is. She said it, you know, it was her reality. You know, that was a real moment for me where I look back, you know, 5-10 years where you couldn't talk about manifesting. It was a well-known concept. And so I think whilst those sort of self-care things that we're seeing around meditation, mindfulness, and there's a whole suite of things, you know, even self-clearing and hypnosis, and, you know, all of those tools that people are starting to develop and use, it's fabulous that they're mainstream. but that's just the self-care. That's not actually the proactive management of the life that we want to be living. And I think unless we start setting those destinations and proactively moving towards them, we're constantly going to be drowning in this pace of change that's moving at a rate that we don't feel we can keep up with.
Right. Yeah. The rate of change is at like supernova speed.
Yeah. And, there's something in our sort of care of self as we mature. I'm sort of middle-aged, or just stepping into that middle-age zone, but I'm really aware of, as we mature, that ability to keep pace is so important, not just physically but mentally, being able to engage in the world in a meaningful way that we feel like we're still connected, because being connected is so important, and keeping our brain active. And so looking at ways that, whilst these new younger generations are coming in with such pace and such technology and such growth, how we can confidently still connect in with what's happening in the world around us, and not feel like that's just bolting, and that we have to step out of that world that's happening at that pace. I really think that's an important thing that we need to be focusing on moving forward.
Yeah, that's so key. What are some of the steps that you would suggest that help individuals to maintain that pace that you're talking about, to stay in that transformational space, which I think is so key? It's like, I think that we're getting to like the meat of it here. So, like, transformation happens every moment, but how can we stay, like you say, focus on the destination, but then
Yes.
also stay in the pace of focusing on the destination? And what are some key things that we can implement then to help us stay in that pace?
Yeah, fabulous, Dr. Lulu. I love it. We're going to get really action focused here. So
Yes.
the whole model around how things transform is to balance those three elements. So things transform when they're in the sweet spot of transformation. And that sweet spot is when your destination element, your awareness element, and your guidance element are all equally balanced. And there's symptoms that show up when you're not balanced. So when you learn the full model, you become really skilled at seeing those symptoms popping up in your life for all aspects of your life, and being able to rebalance in the moment. So we make 35,000 decisions a day approximately. So some of them are really small, some of them are really big. But every single one of those decisions are shaping at some level how you're moving forward, because we're always moving forward. So the practical steps there, I often find myself guiding people to shrink their transformation elements. So we have our big picture destination, and we have our whole life experience and learnings that are our foundation that we're constantly drawing on. And there's a whole world of guidance out there, and Google's everybody's best friend.
Right.
So if you look at those elements in a really big way, that's really difficult to manage. So I'm constantly talking about shrinking those elements. So,
Like
we
narrowing
talked
your
about,
vision a little bit.
yeah. So your destination is not just your big picture vision, it's exploring it in really minute detail. And those minute details become the mini milestones. They're essentially your plan. So you might have a destination that's going to take you 3 or 5 years to achieve, but you've actually got a destination step, a mini milestone that you can do today that will set you on the right path to get there. And so if you can break that destination down to, the smallest detail, then you're able to step forward towards it. But what's really interesting there is, of course, that destination is going to change as you shape what you want it to be. Certainly, my change management consulting practice, what I thought that was going to look like, and as I've tried different things and worked towards different destinations, some things have worked, some things haven't. I've learnt more about myself through that journey, and what I enjoy doing, what lights me up, where my unique value is. And so, as you take those steps forward, you continue to shape what you want that to look like. So I'm always talking about shrinking sort of the elements. So the other one so we talked about the destination, looking at mini milestones, the awareness element, just being really aware of the things that relate most particularly to the destination that you're talking about. So if someone set a big destination of moving career path, and that might involve them going back to uni or studying, and they might carry a big awareness element about, well, I didn't enjoy school, or I didn't particularly enjoy that subject, or I found this hard, or I've got
Mm-hmm.
kids now and it's really hard to find any time. You're constantly carrying that awareness element. But if you can really explore what's not working, so you've got this big career path destination, so you can really explore in detail what's not working about that right now. Okay,
Mm.
well, I haven't actually researched what options are available. I
Right.
made all these assumptions about what that looks like. But actually, if I researched it, so I'm going to jump over to my guidance element here and get some new perspectives. If I spend 5 minutes on Google, I'd probably find out that there's a part-time course, that there's an online course, that you can defer a course, you can do a year, or
Mm-hmm.
So as you get those new perspectives that relate specifically to what's not working, then you've narrowed that focus on the elements, and that helps you keeping moving forward. So that's just one example, but
Mm-hmm.
we sort of got into this path talking about keeping pace with the changing world around you.
Right.
Certainly I find that with the pace of change with technology, and I think it is that just opening up to being okay with the fact that things are moving really fast, and being
Mm-hmm.
okay with the fact that you don't need to know everything. You don't need to
Right.
be in the guidance element for everything. You only
Mm-hmm.
need to be in the guidance element for that very particular thing that's not working in your life in that moment. Not everything that's not working in your life, but the very narrow thing that's not working in your life in that
Mm-hmm.
moment. Go and specifically get guidance that's related to that. And then that helps you sort of shape that detailed destination in even more granular specificity. And then that helps you to then reassess what's not working again to that. And you just keep cycling around and balancing those
Mm-hmm.
elements of staying in the sweet spot and moving forward and moving forward and moving forward.
Oh, that's great. It's so key. And, I really liked what you said about, we don't have to know everything,
Yeah.
and because I think that what is happening with our planet is like we're having so much expansion so quickly, and everybody wants to be like, oh, if I don't know everything, I'm going to be like left behind in the dust. Right.
Yep.
But then if we actually let the people excel 100% in their, like you were saying, their destination and their guidance leading them that way, then we can have these like stars on the path of like, this is what you do great, and I'm going to call you up.
Yes.
You're like, hey, can you
Yes.
help me, because I need you, and then like ding, and then you can move back into your path for your destination. And I think that we're really seeing that because there's lots of new careers that are emerging. We've seen that happen in 2020 as people are like, oh my gosh, I don't know how to use this like at home technology, which is okay, but I need help to learn it, so different things like that. And I really liked what you said about, using your like Google or your research tool to be able to fine tune your destination so that's really clear. And that is so key for people to be able to have a faster paced transformation. Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, when that light at the end of the destination gets brighter and brighter and brighter, we're able to reach it at an accelerated pace.
And then celebrate it when we get
Right.
there.
Woo. Right. And celebrate all the little mini milestones along the way.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So we're talking about the transformation process, and why do you think as humans we have this resistance so much to change? And you were talking about earlier, I loved what you were talking about, like uh, the word change, maybe we need to have a new word for it. I don't know. But what do you think has made this big resistance happen? And then how can we shift it to be more impactful to make this greater shift of transformation? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yep.
Mhm.
So there's someone brilliant in my network, and I'll give her a bit of a plug. That's Mel Ryan. She's a kinesiologist, and she's absolutely
Mm,
brilliant. And one
mhm,
of the things that she talks about in her book, and she's got courses and things as well, but she talks about this idea of being outside in or inside out. And
mhm,
I think what you were touching on there is sort of, I feel that there's a big confidence gap that we have around
mm,
change. And
mhm.
that's because we're most often too much in awareness, where we've
Right.
tried something in the past and it hasn't worked. And so that outside in, inside out concept is we're taking our cues from outside in. So the outside world, we're seeing the Joneses, or, or the people, the
Right.
grass greener on the other side of the fences. Oh, so many metaphors there that I could use about
Mhm,
how we see what's going on in the world outside of us, and we set our our benchmarks and our destinations around what other people have done. And then we get that confidence sort of drop when we don't feel
Mm,
that we have the capabilities to get there to do what all
right.
of those other people are doing. And so that's when it's really important to sort of go more inside and go back into your awareness element and really celebrate, well, what are the foundations that I do have to build upon? Where have I adapted to change in the past? Oh, I got a new phone and I adapted to that really quickly. It was actually, really complex, but I did that really quickly because I was aligned to
Mhm,
that destination. I wanted to be able to use that phone, that brought
mhm.
into my life. So it is really is that balance of being able to recognize where we're being guided by outside influences and being able to reflect inwards at the same time so that we can really truly align where we're headed, that's in congruence with our values and what we really want in our lives.
Yeah, that's so true. Looking inward for the guidance is key for every decision that we make for transformation. Because when we
Hmm.
let the outside forces guide us for our transformation, we might end up transforming into something we didn't want. Which could be good and bad. There's we
It's
like
all
you
learnings.
yeah, it's all learning, right? Like you said, we could be put on a different path that we never imagined because we were guided in a way when we're open to outside influence in a specific way.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think the other thing is acknowledging that mistakes are okay. We
Right.
learn
Yeah.
from the mistakes that we made in
Right.
our lives.
Yeah.
So many entrepreneurs talk about how many failed businesses they had
Right.
before
Yeah.
they got to the right one. And if
Mhm.
they hadn't have been moving forward, if they didn't have, it's the fear of failure, of course, that stops us moving forward. But if they
Right.
didn't have that courage to step forward and make those mistakes, well, they wouldn't be where they are now. And it's the same for us at an individual level, whether it's our
Mhm.
lifestyle or our career or our sense of self or whatever it is that we're wanting to transform in our lives. We really need that courage to set that destination, take a few steps along the path. And if we
Mhm.
make some mistakes, that's okay. We're going to learn and move forward from them.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I mean that's how we grow as individuals when we have that like misstep or that mistake, so to speak. It allows us to then see a different path, like put on the new glasses, see things in a totally different and exciting way, right?
Absolutely. Yep. What you don't want is equally as powerful a destination as what you do want.
Right. Yeah. When we have that clarity, like, oh, I definitely don't want that. It allows what we do want to be 100 bazillion times clearer, which,
Yeah.
we have to say what we don't want so that we can get to our destination, like you said.
Yeah. And I think that loops us back to that, how do we keep pace with the changing world
Hmm.
as well? Or what I don't want, well, I don't want to be bombarded by all of these things that I don't understand and I don't feel I want or need in my life. Okay, that's
Hmm.
okay. I don't want that. And if I decide
Right.
that I do want that, well, then there's going to be, as you said before,
Mhm.
people that have gone down that path before me that can help me and that I can
Right.
learn new perspectives from. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And when we have this block of like where it's like the roadblock, I guess is a good way to describe it. We come to this block, and so how does your process help to break through the block?
Yeah, well, that block that block tells me that you're too much in awareness. So you can sort of stay there for a moment and explore what's not working. Oh, okay, I've got a block. Well, what does that block feel like?
Mm,
And you can
right.
explore. I often talk about the three elements. They're circles in the methodology, but
Mhm.
they're really cones, and I talk about, an ice cream cone. Well, you eat the ice cream first, and then you take the first bite of that cone, and then you
Mm.
sort of circle around the cone, going deeper and deeper and deeper. That's what the elements are like. So if you find that you've got a block, it's about exploring it in more detail. But don't
Mm.
stay there. Don't get stuck in that awareness of what that block is,
Mhm.
because you, at the same time, you want to go, okay, well, what that block feels like is I'm lacking confidence. Okay, well, what my destination feels like is I want super confidence. Okay, that's a really big destination. Okay, how can I
Right.
shift that destination to something that's achievable right now? Okay, well,
Mhm.
I want to be confident when I call an employer. I want to feel confident when I call an employer.
Mhm.
Okay, well, what's not working around that? Okay, well, I doubt my experience. Okay, I
Mm.
doubt my experience. Okay, well, what can I do about that? What new perspectives, what's going into the guidance element, what new perspectives can help me to shift my lack of confidence about talking about my experience? Okay, well, I
Mhm.
can see whether or not other people had the same experience as me. That's a quick Google that I
Right.
can do.
Totally.
Um, I can go to my network and I can ask people. I can find somebody else that's already doing that job. There's so
Right.
many things that you can do just to shift that small thing that's not working in the moment. And then again, once you've moved forward and you call an employer the next day and you feel a bit more confident, then you celebrate it. And that's
Yeah,
your
like,
new
yay.
foundation to build upon. I am
Right.
confident when I call employers. Okay, well, now I want to feel confident when I go on a dating website. Okay, how am I going to, what's not working about that? Okay, well, I'm not confident because some ex-partner told me that I had such and such wrong with my body or whatever. I'm not even going to go there because
Right. That's a whole other podcast.
yeah. But you carry your previous
Right.
experiences, and so then exploring that and going, okay, well, maybe I need some validation around how I feel about myself. Okay, Google.
Right.
Not to say that Google is, the only
Right. But
way to
it's
get
it
new
is a
perspectives, but
source.
it's going and it's seeking that new knowledge. And so
Right.
maybe you find a podcast, or maybe you find a meditation or a self-hypnosis about body love or something that helps
Yeah.
shift you forward in that moment. And then the next day you go on the dating site and you feel more confident about putting yourself forward, and then you celebrate it. And then it
Yeah.
becomes a new foundation. And then you just keep balancing the three elements, constantly moving forward in motion towards your most amazing life. But there is just one other thing that I'll sort of say on that thread. And that is, this fascinates me in organizations, particularly when it's a large organization and we're doing cultural change.
Mm-hmm.
9 times out of 10, I'll walk into an organization and they'll tell me all the things that aren't working about their culture. And then we go about implementing a transformation program, which doesn't look like what they thought it was going to look like. So that organization might say, well, that particular function over there are toxic or, negative or whatever. And
Yeah.
they think that I'm just going to work with that particular team. But actually, if you drill into the awareness of what's not working there, it's probably far more systemic across the organization. So you go about doing a large scale transformation to shift that culture and get really clear on how they want to operate. And so you go through that journey, and that could be a 9-12 month program or even a multi-year program. But as soon as they start shifting, they can't identify with where they started. If you play back to them, well, this is what you told me.
Right.
They
They're like,
can't
no.
even, you can see them not even connecting with it, because once you've shifted forward, that reality that you used to be in isn't there anymore. So it can actually become really hard as you're moving forward at pace to see how far you've come. Because it doesn't feel, when you transform in the moment, like good change and transformation, you don't recognize it because you just move so seamlessly into your new you that you look back and you go, oh, was that really me? How was I so stuck?
Right.
And that's certainly something that I've lived in my life. I certainly, when I was going down that path as a musician, I went so hard at it because I thought that was my destination. And as I've gone through that process of reshaping my destination, my life is better than I could have ever imagined, and the meaningful contribution that I'm making. But to look back on where I was when I was stuck, it can be quite confronting, really.
Yeah, totally. And it's such a amazing thing from the health perspective. I have so many patients. That's why I keep such great chart notes. It's like, remember when you were here a year ago and you came in with like XXX, they're like, oh yeah, you just
Yeah.
totally forget because we don't need to
Yeah.
be in that place anymore. It's
Yeah.
not serving
Yeah.
us, so we're
Yeah.
like, well, why should I remember? Because we don't want to live in the past. We want to move forward.
Yeah, and you can kind of see the eyes glaze over, like there's that kind of conscious knowing that
Right. You're
maybe
like,
that's where they
oh
were, but
yeah.
yeah.
Totally. It reminds me of the mycelium of all the fungi underneath the earth. It's like with this like massive map of all these things connected. And then it's like, if you're over here, you could still be over here and be
Mm.
connected. Does that make sense? It's like, I
Mm-hmm.
love how like, everything, because it's all a part of us, but you could be on this path over here and this path over here, but you're like waving at the other path over there. Like, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it was nice to be over there, but now I'm over here.
Yeah.
Oh,
A beautiful way of describing it.
I'd love for us to talk, just shift gears a little bit because Valentine's Day is coming up. And I'd love for us to talk just kind of about transformation of love, because it's, it's such a big piece for people to shift in because of, it's just all wrapped around all kinds of things,
All
heartbreak,
kinds of
yeah,
things.
loss, everything. But maybe you could just guide us with some, how about like 3 aspects of how it's transformation from that place of love?
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's really interesting because I've talked a bit today about how much we're shaped by that outside in,
Right.
the world around us. And one of the things that I talk about in the personal transformation course is how you might have change in your life, but a true transformation won't occur unless you sort of proactively go through this process of balancing the elements. And so what
Mhm.
that can look like is we just have the same relationship on loop, so we haven't
Right.
actually resolved the issues. And so the new relationship looks and feels a lot like the last relationship. And so a change might have occurred, but a true transformation hasn't. So
Mhm.
as people are sort of moving into their love space for Valentine's Day, and maybe reflecting about a relationship that you're in and
Mhm.
wanting, to up the ante on the love factor there, or maybe it's a relationship that you're looking for in your life, is to be really intentional about that
Mm.
destination for what you want. What do you value in your relationship? So I had a real light bulb moment when I was building the personal transformation course. And I learn and get the value of this method every day. There isn't a day that goes past where I don't have a new light bulb moment that goes, that's how you can apply it. And, okay, that's just going deeper and deeper into that. And so what I realized was that I had been applying my values for career and contribution into my relationships, so both
Mm.
my love, my friendship relationships. I've been applying, this desire that I have for meaningful contribution. It's one of my core drivers, but I've been putting that as a layer over my relationships.
Oh.
So being really intentional about, okay, what are the values that I want for my relationships, whether that be friendship, family, love, whatever. So for me, it was realizing that the most important thing to me was fun in my
Mhm.
relationships, because that balances out my, really strong work ethic and that
Mhm.
meaningful contribution. So actually just allowing myself to relax into the fun that is already there in my relationships, but I wasn't valuing it and I wasn't building on that as something that I wanted really intentionally in my life. So my top tip there is to really be intentional about your values for your relationships and what you want out of them. My second tip there is, when you're being intentional, not be guided by outside in. Be really guided by your
Mhm.
internal self and what works for you. So really be aware of, where you've perhaps watched a movie, or, like, there's
Mhm.
so many outside influences that tell us what our relationships look like. No,
Right.
we
Mhm.
set what we want
Yeah.
our relationships to look like. So there's that top tip there, that second tip. But the third tip, I'd really just celebrate, like
Mm.
Valentine's Day is this beautiful time for celebration. We talked earlier about
Mm.
gratitude, but really celebrate what you already have as a foundation to build upon, in your relationship. I think sometimes we're so focused on all the things that aren't working that we forget to celebrate all of the really good things that are there. And why they are so important is because we can build on them.
Mm.
Things that aren't working, it's hard to set a destination against, because the
Right.
destination, there's a big gap between A and
Yeah.
B. But things that are working, that shrinks the gap between where you are and where you want to be. So being really aware of the things that are working, and then going, okay, well, if I wanted more of that, perhaps it's that with your partner, you enjoy movie night. So how can you grow that movie night into something that's even a little bit more special?
Mm.
Okay, maybe you put 15 minutes of massage before the movie to get in the zone for movie watching, or maybe you
Right.
make it a really nice platter if your love language is around food and sharing in that
Mhm.
way. So how do you build on the things that are already working really well that will help get you further towards that destination that you want?
Fabulous, Dr. Jensen. I love it. Yeah, no, I know it's a wonderful time of year where the media twists things,
Yeah.
in our imagination or vision of what love would look like. And I really liked how you said to, go inward and then shrink the vision. So you're like seeing what's working, which is so key in relationships. Because when we
Hmm.
focus on what's not working, it just gets worse. It multiplies,
Hmm.
right?
Yep.
Totally. Okay, so you mentioned your course, and I'd love for you to just talk a minute about that. it's the personal transformation course, Your Life No Detours, and
Yes.
what that involves and how people can find it and sign up for it and take it and learn and transform their life.
Yep. So if people go to transformation3.org,
Mhm.
they'll easily be able to access not just the Your Life No Detours personal transformation course, but a whole lot more information about the Transformation 3 approach, both for corporates and individuals. But really, the Your Life No Detours course is so fabulous because, and 2020 has been, that's been my silver lining, that I've had the chance to build this for personal transformation.
Mm.
Because normally I'm so caught up in these big corporate transformation programs, I don't get the time. But this year it's really been about packaging that up in a really accessible way
Mm.
that people can understand the foundations of the model and then start applying it straight away. So there's a bunch of tools and templates as part of that course, but probably the most powerful thing is the support group,
Mm.
where other people are there that have done the course to test things. And the thing that I find most is that when I talk about this model, people go, sure, of course, that's really simple. Someone said it's so commonsensical, it's easy. And that is absolutely the response that I get from people. But when you then start to apply it, the complexities start to show, and that's when those blocks start popping up. So the value of the support group is that it really helps to test things as you're going. So I've set a new destination for my sense of self, you know, but I'm feeling this block. Okay, where do I go for new perspectives? And then other people have already lived that. So they go, oh yeah, I was there and this is what I did. And they can give those new perspectives right in the group to help shift people forward. So the course it's 5 modules. It's actually really quick and easy to go through the core content. And then there's all those tools and templates and the support group to help people along the way. And it usually takes about 3 months to really start embedding that approach as a new way of being into your life. And then that's the value that you have to transform at pace for the whole rest of your life.
Yay, love it. Oh, that's great. And so they can find that on the website, the
Yep.
transformation 3, the number 3
Yep.
.org.
.org. Yep.
And then they also can follow you on Instagram, which is Mirra Jensen, MIRRIJENSEN, and I'll put that in the show notes. And then also Facebook too. And that's where you can find the group you're talking about, or you get into the group once you sign up for the course.
Yeah, that group's dedicated as a support mechanism for people that are participating in the course. Yep.
Perfect. Okay, great. One last fun question. If you had an unlimited budget right now, what would you do to make the most impact on the planet?
Yeah, look, it would be sharing this approach with as many people as possible. And
Yay.
yeah, it's so incredibly valuable. I've seen so many amazing results, both for individuals and organizations, through using this. So for me, my absolute passion and purpose is sharing this with as many people as possible. And I'm so excited that the course is now available and accessible for people to learn, not just for themselves, but to help the people around them, and those ripple waves of change that we were talking about earlier. It's just fabulous.
Yeah. Oh, great. I love that. It's when the vision is so clear, it's easy for it to, like you said, reach the destination. So you're on the right path. Thank you, Dr. Jensen. It's been a great pleasure to have you on the show today. And I learned so much about transformation, and I can't wait for the listeners to find out more about you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lulu. It's been an absolute pleasure.